On today's World Insight, clarity on China's foreign policy to be a force of stability, tech advances, and growth. From Chinese Foreign Minister Wang on the sidelines of the two sessions. While we get answers from journalist and author Stephen Witt on why global research thrives in exchanges without barriers.
Hello and welcome to World Insight with me, Tian. Chinese Foreign Minister Wang took questions on China's foreign policy and international relations in his annual presser on Friday. It was held on the sidelines of the ongoing third session of the 14th National People's Congress in Beijing. I was there to ask him a question on the competition between China and the U.S. on science and technology. DeepSeek 异军突起.
The impressive emergence of DeepSeek showcases China's innovation capability in AI. Some say that the U.S. finds it unacceptable to let China get ahead in science and technology. Its instinctive response to China's technological rise is, if you can't win, just snatch it. If you can't get it, just destroy it. What is your view on China-U.S. competition in science and technology?
这段时间中国的科技创新
Recently, China's scientific and technological innovation has more than once defied people's imagination, from breakthroughs in atomic bombs, missiles, and satellites decades ago, to the Shenzhou space missions and the Chang'e lunar exploration program, to 5G, quantum computing, and DeepSeek. Generations of Chinese people have never stopped in their endeavor for innovation, and we're witnessing an expanding horizon for China to become a science and technology powerhouse. Admittedly, this journey has not been smooth, be it missile technology, space science, or chip making. Unjustified external suppression has never stopped. But where there is blockade, there is breakthrough. Where there is suppression, there is innovation. Where there is fiercest storm, there is a platform launching China's science and technology skyward, like the Chinese mythological hero Ne Zha soaring into the heavens. As well put by the nation Chinese verse, no mountains can stop the surging flow of a mighty river. Likewise, high fences and small yards cannot suppress the spirit of innovation, and decoupling and supply chain disruption will only lead to self-isolation. Science and technology should not be used to put up an iron curtain. It should be the wealth that benefits all and is shared by all. To promote common development of humanity, China has taken real measures to implement the Global AI Governance Initiative put forth by President Xi Jinping and released the AI Capacity Building Action Plan for Good and for All. We have also proposed the initiative on international cooperation in open science together with Brazil, South Africa, and the African Union, calling on all to give priority to scientific and technological capacity building of the global south, so that no country is left behind. We are ready to share the fruits of our innovation with more countries and jointly explore the mysteries of the stars and oceans.
This is a very interesting time for the Chinese foreign minister to comment on this because, as we all know, the AI development has freshed the world almost every day. And lately, we see the DeepSeek breakthrough coming from China, creating the great debate about open source vis-a-vis proprietary approach taken mostly by the large language models of the United States. After the Chinese foreign minister answered that question, I checked immediately on DeepSeek. The latest answer it would provide about open source vis-a-vis proprietary approach. It suggests, interestingly, that it is embracing openness, collaboration, and transparency. However, DeepSeek answer provided that it also respects the coexistence of different approaches, whether it's open source or proprietary, and hope it could be complementary. However, it did emphasize in its answer transparency is the key for international collaboration, and the prosperity should be shared. So that's an interesting note. This idea of shared prosperity, of a shared future, has been instilled in almost all the answers that you could find from the Chinese foreign ministers throughout the press conference. The foreign minister quoted earlier an important saying that was popular since the World War II, that there was there is no permanent friends, only permanent interest. However, he corrected that. He said the Chinese version is they're going to be long-term friends and there's going to be permanent shared interests. So that shows that China is going to reflect that spirit in both the exercise of multilateralism and also in the fact it is dealing with big power relations, for example, with the United States, with the European Union, and also working on hotspot issues such as the Russian-Ukraine crisis. So one could find out finally throughout the press conference a stabilizing factor coming from the Chinese capital, Beijing, not only in foreign policy, but also in China's approach as a big nation in the world, economically and politically, and also as a stabilizing factor in the world. There are constant changes of policies and approaches by some capitals. One could see a sharp contrast, and obviously China is clearly taking a higher moral ground on this. As China's Two Sessions, a top yearly political event, is underway, I am, as always, on coverage around the clock, from the Great Hall of the People to important meetings and briefings around the Chinese capital. I will gather the latest polls on the agenda and in-depth talks with key minds on economy, innovation, peace, and prosperity. Join me and be with China in transition. You're watching World Insight with me, Tian. The foreign minister's press conference attracted hundreds of journalists coming from all over the world at a time when many expect China to play a stabilizing role in a world that is experiencing dramatic changes and turbulences. Chinese foreign minister's answer at the presser certainly gave hope and confidence for those who are expecting China to play a bigger role. Among them, Martin Jacques, British academic and author of When China Rules the World. Many believe China has to be a stabilizing factor in the world amid all the dramatic changes and the turbulences. How well China has been able to lead up to that expectation?
Well, I think that if you look at the sort of chaos that's been engulfing the West, you'd have to say that China is a point of and reference point of stability in this situation, because so much is now up in the air. And I think that China's voice now and long term has been always urging the importance of dialogue, the importance of mutual respect, the importance of good relations and working in a positive way with other countries. And that's been a consistent voice from China for a long time now. China's extraordinary cooperation with the global south over a long period. I mean, this has been an absolute central axis point, I think, of pivotal point of Chinese foreign policy. Europe is in a chaotic situation now since Trump's announcements on Ukraine. Suddenly, the whole of its post-war assumptions and strategy have been utterly undermined. So, living in the UK here in London, you can see the almost panic amongst the European elites about how to handle the situation with Ukraine, how to handle Trump, and so on. And I think in this situation, China offers a point of stability, potentially of a new kind of relationship with Europe. Now, which countries might be prepared to respond to that and so on, I think it's still premature. But the fact that China's voice is calm and steady in this situation is important, and it will be heard in Europe.
Martin, as you know, some Chinese scholars suggested U.S. unilateral way can be the best glue for China and the European countries. Do you agree?
I personally feel more cautious than that kind of statement. Not because it could be true, but it might not be true. And the problem with banking on Trump for China is you don't know what Trump's going to do. And you don't really know where he's going to go. So it could all, he could upset the apple cart. So I'm very cautious. We could see some positive developments, but you've got to admit, so far we haven't.
You heard from the Chinese foreign minister sounding positively, but at the same time with caution. He suggested, though, that both sides, China and the EU, have both the capacity and the wisdom to be able to have friendly discussions and dialogue and seek common grounds. How do you see possibilities of that in the next 2 to 3 months?
I do think that it's possible for China to have a positive impact. And I think that Wang Yi's statement on it is definitely very constructive in relationship to this. Exactly what China might be able to do, except offering calm wisdom, if you like, is difficult to know at this point, because all the way through Ukraine situation, China has been inevitably on the sidelines. It's not been easy for it to have, as it were, a foot in the door of some kind of peace settlement. What's happening is that the relationship between the United States and Europe, which has been absolute fundamental to the West since 1945, is over. That is over. It cannot be revived in the old form, and so there's a sort of an extraordinary vacuum at the moment about what's going to happen, what countries are going to do, and so on. And I would say that taking a much longer term view, then if China can develop a increasingly positive relationship with Europe, I think Europe, or some European countries to be exact, will increasingly orientate themselves to China, because they've relied historically in all sorts of ways, economic, political, cultural, ideological, on the United States. That is no longer going to be what can be assumed. And in that situation, why shouldn't Europe look to the other side of the Eurasian landmass at China?
What about the latest development in artificial intelligence and beyond in AI? DeepSeek certainly was an eye-opener for the rest of the world to see how much innovation China has been able to make.
The announcement of DeepSeek, which was 5 or 6 weeks ago now, was a huge moment. I mean, much bigger than we all even realized at the time. That its implications were massive. And what that announcement did was basically, I think, in a profound way, undermine American big tech firms and their approach to AI, because they were going, as you say, with the exception of Meta, on a proprietorial route, and they were saying they needed these huge sums of money, and
the scaling law,
and the money was pouring, it was pouring into their coffers and so on. And then now, this is a wake-up call. No, you don't need to. All of that kind of stuff, we don't need. It can be done in a much cheaper way, a much more efficient way. Look at DeepSeek. And so I think that what DeepSeek's done is not only show to the world, and certainly to America, that actually China is on the forefront of AI research, but actually the nature of the research and the rewards of the research are different to those the way that big tech goes about it. I mean, big tech goes, for big bucks and big expenses. Actually, what DeepSeek has shown is, it's open source, so it's available, it can be shared, the source codes can be shared. This is a different type of technology. This is AI for the world. And crucially here, potentially in time, AI for the global south. So I think that what actually DeepSeek embodies in an extraordinary, articulate way is what Chinese technology and Chinese modernization means which is profoundly different from the American approach.
You heard also from the press conference from the Chinese foreign minister. He used the analogy to describe when there is a suppression, there's likely to be rebound, talking about the innovation and talking about breakthroughs in technology and science. He used an analogy quoting the latest movie, the biggest box office earner in the Chinese movie history, which is called Ne Zha 2. He said the storm where it is most violent is precisely the place where Ne Zha conquers the sea and feathers soar into the sky. Well, there's a lot of Chinese analogies over there, but certainly it shows the kinds of ambitions that China has, and also the kinds of can-do spirit in a way. How do you see, China's attitude reflected by the foreign minister's press conference?
I thought that Wang Yi's answer to this question was extremely articulate and compelling. You see, I think that I feel this, that this is a great breakout moment for China. It's not just technological, it's also cultural. So China is arriving on the global stage now as a symbol of both technological and cultural modernity, and you can see this in the films, but also lots of other developments with regard to you put TikTok in this category and so on. So I think China, this is the great moment for large numbers of people around the world, not least in the West, where China's cultural and technological achievements arrive and impact and will shape a lot of the future. It won't be just shaped by America anymore. It's going to be shaped by China, and that is a very, very important development. The other thing I'd want to say in relation to what Wang Yi said, which I think is absolutely correct, which is, there was when the AI development happened in America about a year or so ago, people weren't thinking about China. China wasn't part of the conversation. No one talked about China, certainly in the West. They were just talking about, wow, look what America's doing. And just a year, and the thought in the back of the minds, I'm sure, the front of the minds of a lot of American government and so on, was, we've got a big lead here. We're winning the technology war and all that kind of stuff. And it's just not the case. They're really, excuse my English expression, they've been caught with their trousers down in this situation. It is just not true. The assumption they were making was wrong. They think they can stop China developing. I mean, this is ridiculous. They were never going to stop China developing. I mean, how can you, it's like trying to, it's like the dam I used to build as a boy on the beach, hoping they'll stand up to the waves on the incoming tide. It's just not going to happen.
That's my latest conversation with Martin Rack right after Chinese Foreign Minister's annual presser. You're watching World Insight. Coming up, my latest conversation with American writer and journalist Stephen Witt on China-US interactions in the field of artificial intelligence. Next. Welcome back. You're watching World Insight with me, Tian. High-tech research needs global cooperation to thrive, rather than the small yards with high fences approach of some in the international community. The people-to-people exchanges between China and the United States do benefit the whole scientific and tech community. Stephen Witt is an American journalist and writer. I met him this week in Beijing during his latest book tour in China. For his latest work, The Thinking Machine, Yansen Huang, NVIDIA, and the world's most coveted microchip. That book has been translated into Chinese lately and published here in China. He told me he is very excited interacting with his readers here in this country, not to mention making a trip to the Great Wall. You were once on the Great Wall already.
That's right.
Mu Tianyu, Great Wall, right?
That's right. The first day I was here, I went up it. It was really amazing. Yeah.
It was built 1400.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, 600 years ago. Yeah, it's hard to think about.
But think about it, 300 years before the first industrial revolution.
I know. And they built all that. It's so big, too. It's hard to imagine.
It's interesting how technology and engineering from that time has leaped forward to today.
That's right. In fact, we're now, if you believe Jensen and NVIDIA, we're undergoing a second industrial revolution, a new industrial revolution with AI.
And that book is amazing, what you wrote.
Oh, thank you.
And he is, well, you have been writing about him, in the middle of all the dramatic changes, even though he is riding on that boat.
Yes, exactly. I mean, I got to see, when I started, NVIDIA was not the biggest company in the world. I mean, it was growing, but while I was writing about it, the company's value shot up like this. It went up almost like 3 times while I was writing the book. And it became the most valuable company in the world while I was writing the book. So I was lucky, I kind of got a little bit ahead of the story there. That was great, yeah.
There's a new phenomenon, relatively speaking, for the past few years. Something called a small yard high fence. It's a phrase used by then the National Security Advisor of the Biden administration about how the US will deal with China technologically speaking, for example, with export control, with decreased interactions among the top technicians and computer scientists in order to avoid competition coming from China. So how do you see entrepreneurs like Jensen and many others from both sides are trying to deal with this reality? Things could get even more intense.
Yeah, they have to do scenario planning for a great number of different outcomes, and this is tricky to do. But you know, firms like petroleum firms have operated in this kind of reality for a long, long time. What Shell used to do was they would have like a huge number of scenarios that they would plan out, and then they would kind of adapt the strategy that would work in even the more pessimistic scenarios. I imagine now that firms that have not politically had to deal with geopolitical entanglements will have to think more like petroleum firms do, right? They'll have to think about, okay, so what if this happens? What if this regime collapses? What if like conflict erupts here? What if tariffs show up here? So this kind of scenario planning is something that I think a lot of tech companies and entrepreneurs will now need to adopt. It's kind of a new world for them. It's a new world, especially as you think about the supply chains, but also customers as well. You know, China represents 10%, I think, or more of NVIDIA's sales. So they have to think about this in a different way now, I think. Yeah.
Also for us journalists.
Yeah.
We write about a globalized world, right? But now we have to study in a very fragmented world and see whether there's underlying logics of it, and how can we study it first and be able to present it to our readers or our audience.
In some ways, it's like a return to the Cold War era, right? Except the
hopefully not.
Hopefully not. But the difference now is communication technology is so advanced that we can still communicate and speak with and see any part of the world. That can't go away. That genie is out of the bottle. So no matter what happens geopolitically, we're still connected in ways to the other citizens of the globe that we've never been before. It's an evolving world. For all of my adult life, the trend has been toward globalization. You know, and I'm 46 years old. Like now, it's starting to go in the other direction, and it's a learning experience for me too. Like it's all new for me. I have to adapt.
The scaling law was once the most popular idea.
Yeah.
With the emergence of DeepSeek, for example, and some of the other choices, people realized it may not be the only way or the best way.
Yeah.
How did Jensen Huang and his colleague react to that? Some suggest his empire is built upon the consistent needs of better, bigger computational power.
Actually, they're optimistic. Their point of view is that the demand for intelligence is infinite and cannot be satisfied by any innovations. So if DeepSeek makes it 90% more efficient to develop intelligence, that only increases demand for better and better AI products.
Right.
So they actually see this as, in some ways, a good thing. Furthermore, DeepSeek's innovations really happened on top of older NVIDIA chips. So this causes the other players in AI to go out and hire similar people and try and optimize in the same way. They actually see this as a promising thing. Now, the other thing that's happening is there's...
Optimizing, that's a very interesting thing. Tell us more about what you have found out from people you talk to as to new ways they try to optimize the existing computational power of their products.
Right. So at the bottom we have the transistor, the silicon, and up here we have the programmer. In between, there's a ton of layers of code, okay? And this is actually where DeepSeek had a lot of innovations, down at these lower levels of code. This had historically been NVIDIA's domain. They were very, very good at getting these lower levels of code to run faster silicon and run faster programs. And so the fact that DeepSeek was able to do it came as a surprise to a lot of people. Most of the other programming groups had just left this to NVIDIA. They hadn't gone into the sort of the domain, the catacombs of computing, and tried to look for new improvements. Well, the only limit down here really is brain power. You know, as long as you're smart, you might find new things to speed up the ones and zeros of computing. And that's really what DeepSeek did. It was a great accomplishment. And so I think NVIDIA's view, though, is that this is positive. They want people to improve this. They want their chips to go faster. Remember, even though DeepSeek kind of like did this as a kind of a new thing and as a surprise, ultimately they did it on NVIDIA's platform, right? They were running on NVIDIA's chips.
Right. They were making it public about that.
Yeah, they were older chips, but they were still NVIDIA's chips.
Right.
So I think NVIDIA sees this as a good thing. The other thing to remember is they split up the training side of it. So this is where we teach the AI what we want it to do. But there's a whole other side called inference. And this is when we ask the AI new questions. You know, maybe 18 months ago, we were asking the AI relatively simple questions like, can you write this term paper for me? Can you write me a letter? Now we're asking it much more complex questions. Can you book me a vacation? Can you book me a flight to Europe, right? Can you solve this complex scientific problem or mathematical problem that no human being has solved in 200 years of trying? So when we go to the inference side of it, there's actually increasing and ballooning demand. And so this is positive for NVIDIA as well.
Sounds all very interesting. The other thing as well, open source.
Yeah.
Once DeepSeek opened the floodgate of open source, as you have just witnessed over the past few weeks, we see proliferation of competitions going on because everybody can build new things on top of the shoulder of each other.
Yes.
So that's the exciting part. But then that also means new demands in different directions for chips. Of course, most of them are coming from NVIDIA. How are they, from what you have gathered as a journalist, try to fit into this new direction and make sure open source can be a new inspiration for them?
I think the open source thing is a bigger threat to companies like OpenAI and Grok and all of the other competing models than it is to NVIDIA. I think it's good for NVIDIA. And after initially plummeting a lot, NVIDIA stock in the wake of the DeepSeek first release, it's actually gone all the way back up as people have sort of absorbed and internalized that this may be a positive development for NVIDIA. There's so much competition on the software side. There's 100 companies trying to build new LLMs. On the hardware side, there's still only one real provider, and that's NVIDIA.
I heard from your friends that you're having a great time here in China. You met with the university students and some of the high school kids, as well as those coming from the tech circle. You've been talking to your readers. How are they interacting with you? Are you enjoying your days here in China?
I went to the Tsinghua University. The students there were very bright. I was talking with the integrated circuit students, the new microchip designers, the next generation. In that room, my guess is probably the next Jensen Huang, because that's what he studied, and he would have been there when he was 20 years old. And their level of intelligence and the question they asked were the best I'd ever had from any audience.
And what about the young kids? You also met some of them, right?
I met a bunch of high school students, and those questions were incredible. In fact, they were the best questions in some ways.
Oh,
because they would ask things like, why should I go to college if I can learn everything from the AI? What a great question.
That's a great question.
Those students were extraordinarily bright. It gave me a lot of hope for the future.
And that's all the time we have for today. If you'd like to know more, search World Insight or check out our YouTube channel. Follow us on X and Facebook. I'm Tian Wei on behalf of my team. Thanks for being with us. Bye for now.